This is Scott Spears, and on Saturday, September 17th, in a WBC welterweight championship fight between Floyd Money Mayweather and champion Tito Ortiz, a new champion was crowned. Floyd Mayweather captured the WBC welterweight championship in rather, shall we say, controversial fashion. But what may have been even more controversial is the interview that took place after the fight with longtime HBO analyst Larry Merchant, which still has us talking today, and we'll talk about that in just a second, as we're joined by one of my favorite people, even before the fight, longtime HBO boxing analyst Larry Merchant. Larry, thank you so much for speaking with us during a rather busy time.
Well, thank you. I haven't been back to Ohio for a long time.
You'll have to come back sometime.
Well, I used to pass through regularly when I was a sports columnist in Philadelphia, New York, Cincinnati, Cleveland occasionally, Columbus occasionally. So I've been around there, and I had a grandson who was a baseball player at Ohio State.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did he do well?
He did well. Then he transferred, went to a school in Florida, and now he's in the real estate business in California.
Hey, well, that's not, well, shaky business now, but we wish him the best.
Thank you. I will let him know that. And he was at the event the other night, and I'm sure he'll remember it for a few years.
Well, Larry, we have to talk about this, and before we get to your part in this, because obviously that's blown up on the internet even somewhat more than the fight, let's talk about the fight itself. Ortiz champion versus Mayweather. Everybody knows by now, everybody's seen the footage, that Ortiz headbutted Mayweather, and they stopped for a second, and you can view the footage for yourself. But Ortiz went in, they were going to, touch gloves, and Mayweather knocked him out. What was your take on that as you're watching it before the whole melee broke out between you and Mayweather?
Well, Ortiz was trying to get back into the fight by roughhousing with the much more technically superior Mayweather, and let go with his head as part of the roughhousing, and was penalized a point. And he was embarrassed by it. He's an embarrassable kid in a sport which has few people who are willing to be embarrassed about anything. And so he tried to do a little kissy, thank you, I'm okay, we're okay, let's just go ahead in the middle of the ring. And the referee didn't seem to have full control. And while the fighters started to separate, he was looking at the timekeeper, and perhaps said something about let's go, and Ortiz, the younger fighter, made a rookie mistake, and he was not watching carefully, and his head was sort of floating somewhere and his jaw sticking out, and Mayweather jumped in and clocked him. And it was a sucker punch. There's no question that it was a sucker punch, but within the fine terms of boxing and the rules, it was a legal punch. You are supposed to defend yourself at all times. But from anyone sitting in the arena, or presumably at home, all you saw was one guy hitting another guy who wasn't defending himself. And there was a volatile reaction in the arena. And even in boxing, maybe there's a small place where sportsmanship is supposed to exist. That didn't.
Concerning the fight itself, from what you'd seen up until that point, if that had not happened, if the sucker punch, as it were, had not happened, how would that fight have ended?
Well, we have to assume that Mayweather would have won the fight. It's possible that Ortiz would have gotten back into it because he was physically stronger and had finally decided that the only way he could cope with Mayweather is to try to use that physical strength. by fighting him at close quarters and roughing him up, which is an old tactic in boxing. But in that process, whether from frustration or whether from insufficient preparation, he just threw the head, and that triggered this sequence of events. I have never personally seen a fight, a big fight, surely, end in such a fashion. And there was a clear sense of unfair play on the part of those who were out in the audience and hoping for a good fight and watching the young fighter start to show a little bit of mustard. And but we'll never know.
Larry, interestingly enough, if that weren't enough to talk about, because that's certainly a lot to talk about, after the fight, here came another bit of news that involved you, and of course you know what we're talking about. For those who don't, after the fight was over, and I just watched the footage right before I called you, just to look at it again, Mayweather had been declared the winner, and Ortiz came over, and it looked like kind of gave him a half hug and a sort of pat on the back, and you were doing a typical Larry Merchant interview, which I've seen you do for years. The crowd was booing very clearly. Anybody who looks at the video can see that. And you got a few questions in, and the interview seemed to be going okay. And then at one point, Mayweather turned to you and decided to tell you you don't know anything about boxing, HBO should fire you, and you can't give him a fair shake. When that happened, what triggered that, first of all, in your mind, Larry?
Well, if anybody looks at the replay of the fight on Saturday night on HBO, I'll let them judge whether I was asking any questions to provoke him. I thought I was asking questions just to get not only information, but his side of the story. You know, for example, he kept repeating, you're supposed to protect yourself at all times. Then suddenly this outburst, which I think could be properly labeled another sucker punch, legal or not. And what I thought provoked it, mostly at that moment, I think it was the booze. Reason being, although Mayweather likes to portray himself as the villain in fights, in the reality shows of 24/7, it is a part of his personality. But after a fight, he wants complete, unadorned worship, not unlike some other athletes. And when you ask him a question, he thinks it's criticism. And maybe sometimes it is. So he has this kind of friction with many people in the media. I am one of them, and because I do these interviews for HBO, they're there. So this outburst came out, and I spontaneously threw a counterpunch.
The counterpunch, which I'm going to clean up just a bit, doesn't need to be cleaned up much, was, I wish I was 50 years younger, I'd kick your butt. And you didn't say butt, for those who watched it. You said it was spontaneous. Larry, did you lose your cool? Was that, what happened there?
It was to me, it was an honest moment of someone defending himself. He was insulting me. I don't think that everybody has to be cool all the time. Now, there have been other occasions where, after a heated fight, and I ask a question, whether it was a so-called tough question or an innocuous question, when a fighter was unhappy, that you know, I've been doing this for 35 years, and so that's bound to happen, and I understand it. And what I do is I let the fighter go, and then I say thank you, and end the interview, and let the viewers decide for themselves what that was all about. But in this case, it was more personal. And so I responded as I did. I stood up for myself, and I'm not apologizing.
Larry, do you think it had anything to do with the fact that arguably, or maybe not arguably, Floyd Mayweather is the most, popular is not the right word, but visible boxer in the world today? Do you think he would have the stroke to pay off on some of those things, saying that you are not giving people a fair shake, that you don't know anything about what you're doing, and that HBO should fire you? Could that have been part of the reason in this instance that you lost it?
Well, I'm not quite sure. First of all, Manny Pacquiao is the biggest fighter in the world, but beyond that, I'm not quite sure. I mean, look, I'm being personally and professionally insulted, and there's nothing in the book that says that a journalist or a commentator just has to stand there and let somebody beat up on him. And I've been doing this for a lot longer even than 35 years. And I responded. If it was not as professional as some people would prefer, then that's their choice. Then that's their perception, and I can live with it. It's not like I have been pugnacious with a lot of pugilists before.
Larry, have you talked to the HBO suits since this happened?
They're telling me that I'm a folk hero because this has gone viral. In the modern communications world, I think by the time I got out of the ring, it was around the world 6 times, and twittering and doing who knows what else. So there's been a lot of response, most overwhelmingly favorite, with a few criticisms. That's part of the deal. I don't have to be perfectly loved, and HBO has been tremendously supportive.
Do you think if this ever happened again, Larry, that HBO would take the same stance? Not to say you're going to do this again, because obviously you've had a long career, but sometimes people become known for that one moment in their career when something did go viral now. Do you think if it happened again, HBO would be as calm?
You know, if it happened again, it would seem contrived. It would seem like, okay, he's looking for another 15 minutes of fame by pulling off an act. And that's not me. I mean, that's certainly not my intention. I mean, this whole thing has been a giggle for me. I mean, here we are on Thursday after a Saturday fight, and I'm still trying to explain and giggle about the whole thing. That has never happened before. But no, that's, you have to put it in the context of a career. I didn't go into the ring or into the interview intending to do that. Never had done it before. Don't expect to do it again.
I would say if it happened with another fighter, it would be contrived. But do you think that your path with Floyd Mayweather will cross again? And if it does, something like that could happen again?
Anything, look, anything is possible. I once had some back and forthing with Bernard Hopkins, who can also be testy at times. And this was after an off-camera back and forth that was pretty intense. And then he stood up for an interview with me. I asked him the questions I had to ask, and asked questions of the answers he gave. And then he looked at me and said, "Larry, we have to take this show on the road." I don't know if Floyd Mayweather has that kind of self-possession. I don't know what the future will bring. He is a force in the boxing world because of the tremendous revenues he generates, and that gives him some power. And we'll see how he uses it, whether he tries to use it or diffuse this, and show that he could laugh it all off, and me as well. I don't know if which way he would go, and I'm as curious as the next fellow to find out.
Your opinion as it stands today, Larry, when Mayweather fights again down the road, you'll be there. I mean, most certainly.
Not necessarily. I should explain to you that I divide the big fights with Max Kellerman. I used to do them all. Now we divide them. He's doing the Pacquiao fight in November, and it will depend on the cycle of how those things come up. And I have no idea. But let's assume that I will be there.
Well, I would just think, Larry, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that when Mayweather fights again, for as viral as this went, don't you think HBO, chances are going to put you there just to see what happens?
No, I don't think it works that way. I think there'll be, in the real world, there'll be discussions beforehand. Mayweather will have his input. Things will cool down. He's a very, very shrewd self-promoter and marketer, and he may just decide, if Larry's there, we may get a bigger audience because people will want to see the interview, and I'll make money off it. Or he may say, I don't want to see Larry's face again. So I don't know which way it'll go.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing, Larry. Two questions immediately come to my mind off your statement. If you are there, by happenstance or by HBO wanting you there for this one, do you think he'll give you an interview, in your opinion?
Well, I've had, some friction, shall we say, over the years with certain fighters. They used to say I was the only one Mike Tyson was afraid of in the ring. But it's my experience that, fighters want to go on after the fight. They want to be able to talk to fans, to tell people how they feel, and so on. It's to their benefit. So I don't really know. And I'm okay with whatever happens. It's, I don't worry about things I can't control. He's the star. He's the fighter. The fighter and the fight are the stars. I'm just a guy who is a commentator and a journalist.
Coming off of that, the other question I would have from the prior statement would be, Floyd Mayweather does no publicity, obviously. That's his whole kind of gimmick, as it were.
I don't know where you get that impression, but I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
That he fights for the money and that the purse size is the interest and his record is very important to him. A lot of pomp and circumstance, I think.
Well, and has literally turned the 24/7 series on HBO that leads up to the fights into his own reality show.
Right.
And very, very acute understanding of how modern media works.
With that, I don't want to interrupt you, Larry, but with that statement, with the acute understanding of how modern media works, was this a publicity stunt?
No, I think it was a real reality show, that it was spontaneous on both sides. His disappointment with being booed after he won a fight. My button being pushed. And I don't expect that that sort of thing will happen again, but maybe some others will try to have some fun with it. to me, it's an amazing incident. It shows that if you hang around long enough, you'll get your 15 minutes.
Some people in the world of I don't even know if I want to say sports when I mention this name, but some people with high profiles have spoken out. One of them being Dana White of the MMA world, calling you senile in what you did. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me want to go take my Lipitor. So,
do you care what Dana White says?
Well, I'm amused by it. I mean, but hey, he's entitled to his opinion, and he's a guy who controls all the production on his telecast because he doesn't want guys like me around asking anybody a serious question. But hey, that's Dana White. He's a much bigger, cat in this jungle than I am.
The other interesting fallout was from Floyd Mayweather himself, and kind of gave a conundrum of a question here. How can you be an expert if you've never had a fight directed toward Larry Merchant? Obviously, you didn't have a chance to answer that when he asked it. How do you answer that now?
How can you criticize the President of the United States if you've never been a President of the United States? How can you talk about a movie you saw if you never wrote or directed or starred in a movie? Come on.
So an analyst does not have to be, has never had to be in the field.
Well, I've been covering big fights for over a half a century. If that makes me an expert, then I'm an expert. I have been around fighters, talked to trainers, promoters, and such for a very, very, very long time. I may have a perspective on the game that is different than the prize fighters. I may have some knowledge of the, let's say, technical aspects of fighting, but in our broadcast team we have an announcer host, Jim Lampley, who is really smart and does a terrific job. We have one of the most famous trainers in the world, Emmanuel Stewart, who is there for technical support, who understands all of the tiny nuances of the game. And I have my role in a kind of overview role of a reviewer who is watching something unfold right in front of him. So we each have a role, and I think the sum total of it is to give the audience an insight into what they're looking at. But it's a show and tell medium, and the show normally tells them almost all of what they have to know, and sometimes the tell helps to amplify, explain, point out. That's what I do.
Larry, it's been a few days now, and obviously the media's been after you. I saw TMZ catching you in the airport as you were coming home.
Right. That was a first, I have to tell you.
You became paparazzi material, paparazzi fodder.
I went out to dinner last night, and they were chasing me around.
Aside, what's that like? First of all, oddly, it hasn't happened to me. What's that like?
Well, it's a surprise, and since I've been in the media virtually all of my life, I feel a certain obligation to stop and answer a reasonable question. Maybe not always the right or smart thing to do, but I do feel an obligation to folks like you and even TMZ. They ask me a question, and I hope to give them a reasonable answer and maybe a smile if I can.
And I do think you've handled it very well on that level, my personal opinion. You've heard from the media, obviously. Have you heard from Jim Lampley. To my mind came George Foreman, your old broadcasting partner. All your friends in the boxing world. Have you heard from them personally? Moments that haven't happened on camera, or?
Oh yeah, we've had a few exchanges and laughs. You know, Jim sent me, emailed me a photo of the T-shirt somebody is putting out, believe it or not, with a profile of me and the words, if I was 50 years younger, I'd kick your butt, okay?
Uh-huh.
And also someone put out a fight poster of Mayweather and Merchant in 1961, 50 years ago. So we've all, you know, smiled at this kind of thing, and how could you not?
Got it. This may be the most...
And I did hear from Sugar Ray Leonard.
What did he say?
He said he never sucker punched anybody in his life.
Oh.
And Sugar Ray Leonard was one of the great fighters of modern times.
If you wanted to, I don't remember if Jim Lampley gave his opinion that night, but...
Yeah, he did. And I'm glad he did, because in all the turmoil and the... I felt it was to the best interest to just laugh a little and just not go there. But Jim said it in effect, just because you have the right to do it doesn't mean you're right to do it. And that's a kind of philosophical and moral position about sportsmanship that I'm glad that one of us expressed.
I got to wrap up this interview, Larry, with two questions. One a little ridiculous and one not so ridiculous. First one, which is the ridiculous one, because people will ask this. 50 years ago, could you have whooped his butt?
Well, I also said that. No, I couldn't have, but I sure would have tried.
I believe it, Larry. I believe it. Number two, in the very beginning of this interview, you said you would not apologize. But do you regret it? As a broadcaster, as a journalist?
Not a spot. You can't regret being who you are unless you're really a bad guy. And what I did was, I think, the human thing to do. That when you're attacked, you stand up for yourself.
Final question. Did this help boxing? As crazy as it sounds, did it help it? Will it help it?
You know, there's never been a time in the history of boxing, even when it was the biggest mainstream sport, where it didn't have a series of controversies that go along with it. Where it's in a world of that's been called the red light district of sports. Every man for himself, in and out of the ring. Curious things sometimes happen. Their law breaking goes on. Corruption, as in other sports, and it doesn't hurt the game. It doesn't particularly help the game. It gives there's a buzz about this event now. It probably will reverberate, resonate for a little while, and maybe when he fights again, or maybe when I go on the air again. But it will just be another happy bump in the road.
Well, Larry, I really, truly can't thank you enough for giving me this interview. Certainly you have become a paparazzi icon for this time and place, and to take time to give me an interview is appreciative of me and appreciated by me, and I'm also sure by the audience that will get to hear this. And I want to make this statement. I've been watching HBO Sports for a long time, and I'm not in the position to say what you did was right or wrong, and it wouldn't matter either way. But there were a lot of times I was watching HBO, and the only thing that entertained me was the questions you were asking after and the insights you were bringing on during. So don't ever leave, because I don't know if I'd continue to watch.
Scott, that's really kind of you. Thank you.
Larry Merchant, paparazzi figure this week, boxing analyst, journalist, always. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Scott Spears, headed for the dugout.